Thank you very much. Also from my side, really welcome. Thanks, Agnes, for actually hosting us. We're very happy to present and especially discuss the results of our findings with you, because you do come from different countries, and I'm sure you also have particular insights on the relations of your country with Taiwan. Let me start with the best news. The study that we published end of this year, it's really available on the CEIAS website. So you can have a look at it if you are more interested into details. And I'm really happy that we have so many colleagues, of course, not all contributors, because in our study, we do cover the relations of Taiwan with the EU, plus all 27 EU member states, plus United Kingdom, Norway, represented by Julia Marinaccio, and also Switzerland. So it's the first study of this kind. And it's actually a follow-up of a previous study, which was called Dumpling Alliance. And there the focus was only on Taiwan's relation with Central Eastern Europe. But we got a really good response and feedback. And therefore, we were actually happy to extend our study to all EU members, plus the mentioned one. Having said enough now for the introduction, I'm really happy to give the word to Matej Sinology, who will show us or give us an overview about our main findings, and you will also establish some patterns and highlight the differences.
All right. Thank you, Alfred and Agnes, for introducing us and the study that we did. So let me just jump in with some of the findings. The study itself was called Partners in Need, Partners Indeed, Tracking Europe-Taiwan Relations Amidst Global Disruption. And that is kind of the framing that we did for the whole study. But before I start, let me maybe introduce our institute a little bit more. Central European Institute of Asian Studies is a think tank originally founded in Slovakia, in Bratislava, but nowadays also with quite a presence in Vienna, thanks to Alfred and his team here, but also in Prague, with where some of our colleagues are based. We conduct research and advocacy on many different issues related to Europe's relations with the Indo-Pacific region, EU-Taiwan relations being one of the key pillars there, which led us in 2022, due to the increasing demand for understanding Taiwan and making sure how to navigate the relationship, to starting our EU-Taiwan Center within a CEIAS, where we've conducted many different projects. Alfred mentioned some of those, but really the flagship project we have is the EU-Taiwan Tracker, a interactive database that we are running containing data since 2019. Which is updated maybe every 2-3 weeks on what is happening on the bilateral level between individual EU member states and Taiwan, which is also the data that has fed into producing this paper that we are discussing today. This was a first of its kind systematic tracking of European states' ties with Taiwan using a bottom-up approach. So looking at every single European Union member state and plus those 3 others on their own individual merit, looking at the bilateral relations rather than amalgamating them into the single European whole that we sometimes see when papers on Europe-Taiwan are produced. Of course, that approach also has its merits, but we wanted to see really on what's going on the individual state level, so we can also compare and understand whether individual countries deviate in their approach and how their approaches are individual evolving, and whether we see some commonality in the trajectory that's coming up. So we were looking at not just political relations, but also economic cooperation, also subnational ties, people-to-people contacts, and academic exchanges, because this is a multi-layered relationship, and we need to understand the patterns in each of those layers to have a holistic picture of how the relationship is evolving. So since we are we ran this analysis for the paper based on the tracker, we have the good fortune of being able to also quantify the relationship, not just looking at the relationship from a qualitative perspective. And if we look at this from the longitudinal perspective, since 2019, so the last pre-pandemic year, we've seen the volume of engagements skyrocket, really. Between 2019 and 2024, we see essentially a 5-fold increase in the volume of engagement. So meetings, MOUs being signed, various other forms of bilateral interaction that we are looking at in the tracker. Naturally, Europe is a heterogeneous region, so not all countries engage with Taiwan equally. We see different countries having very different appetites for engagement, very different levels of risk appetite when it comes to potential coercion from China, for example, due to pursuing the ties. And what we are seeing is that, of course, a lot of the relations are driven directly on the EU level, especially due to activity of the members of the European Parliament. But even that in and of itself is a fairly recent development, since only the very first official delegation out of the EU Parliament to Taiwan happened only in 2021. The delegation of the subcommittee on FIMI and hybrid warfare and threats to democracy. Besides the EU Parliament and other EU institutions, the most active countries in that time frame of 2019 to 2024 were Czech Republic, Lithuania, Germany, France, Slovakia, and Poland. If we look at also potential trajectories of how the relationship is very probably going to evolve in the future, in the next 5 years, we've seen that there are preconditions in most countries for continued engagement. And in only 2 countries, we currently decided to evaluate the relationship as having a negative outlook, that being Hungary and Slovakia. The Slovak case is quite interesting, right? Because on one hand, we have a negative outlook, but also Slovakia being present in one of the top most active countries, right? And this highlights the big issue that we see in the relationship, and that is that the poor institutionalization of the relationship leads to electoral volatility in how the relationship is evolving. Different political parties in individual countries have different priorities when it comes to their foreign policy and how they engage with external actors. So that, of course, creates changes in their attitude. Alfred has previously mentioned the study we published in early 2023 that was looking at the period of 2019 to 2022. At the time, Slovakia was number 2 overall across the whole Central and Eastern European region, and now it has dropped to 5th place. So based on the patterns of engagement, not only the quantitative amount of relations, but also evaluating the individual types of engagements on a qualitative perspective, because of course, different types of engagements carry very different weight for the relationship. We've categorized all the countries that we evaluated into 4 broad categories, and we labeled them old partners, new friends, pragmatists, and laggards. Really essentially based on how much of an activity we see both in the political as well as in the economic area. The old partners are countries that do have a rather longer term engagement with Taiwan, and the engagement is not really so much politically scrutinized domestically. Of course, there are ups and downs over time, but overall, the relationship sort of has its natural level and natural momentum. New friends are countries that are up-and-coming partners for Taiwan. They started to engage around 2020, 2021. That's when the big skyrocketing in the volume of engagement started to happen. And they do have quite robust political ties now, but of course, the economic relationship still needs to catch up a little bit to it. Right now, it's 3 countries that we have labeled as such, Poland, Czechia, Lithuania. Until 2023, we would have labeled Slovakia as well, but as I said, the relationship has lost its momentum under the current government, which has a very different approach how to engage Indo-Pacific, very much focused on engagement with the PRC. Hence, the drop down to the next category of pragmatists, countries that do wish to have beneficial economic ties, but for a variety of reasons don't engage on a political level, at least not openly. Of course, there are some political engagements that are happening not openly, but that in and of itself is a good proxy measure of the maturity of the relationship, whether you are willing to engage Taiwan openly as well. Last but not least, the laggard group, countries which have very little interactions, and with the one common thing that none of these countries has opened the representative office in Taiwan. Here we still also include countries like Latvia and Estonia, which are increasingly starting to engage with Taiwan, but they have not yet made this step into opening a representative office. Estonia being currently in negotiations on this point with Taiwan. So maybe in the next iteration of this study, we will have to upgrade it and we will see a positive story developing there. If we look back again on the quantitative and decompose it on the average volume per each category that I outlined, we see a very similar pattern. Very sharp uptake in engagements for EU institutions, old partners, and new friends in the past few years. Much less in the pragmatists and laggards group, but even there we see a slight uptake in the relationship. So this sort of Taiwan wave is something that has gone through the entire continent. Of course, in some countries we still have very minimal interactions, but in the group as such, there's growing engagements, and we will need to see how this relationship develops down the line, whether the momentum holds up for all the countries, whether it will start to go down, maybe in some of those categories, maybe it will level out at some point after the initial hype of 2022 has fallen off. So this is something we need to look into for the future. Mutual visits, that's a sort of pinnacle of engagements. Political delegations, similar story, both from Taiwan to EU and from EU to Taiwan, increasingly normalize the visits. Typically up to the deputy minister level, ministerial level visits from Europe to Taiwan or vice versa are still very rare. If we would look at European ministers traveling to Taiwan for official engagements, there have been only 2 such instances over the past years. German Minister of Education and Czech Ministry of Science. Even when Taiwanese ministers increasingly travel to Europe, it's rarely for official open discussions with the same level counterparts. It's usually more asymmetrical or limited to speaking at conferences, for example, which provide a good proxy for engagement in politically difficult environments. Similar decomposition per countries as we've seen in the overall relations. So I will just quickly outline what it looks like on a sectoral level, because this will feed very nicely into what the individual country presentations are going to mention. Relationship started to develop quite a bit on the political and security level. We have a growing set of binding agreements being signed by individual countries. Majority of European states now have opened or host themselves Taiwanese representative offices, but the momentum is slowing down. In 2003, the representative office in Slovakia opened, and then until 2021, nothing happened until the Lithuanian office opened, and now we have the negotiations about Estonia going on. Security cooperation, that's probably the most sensitive of these dimensions. That's also something that's increasingly happening, especially when it comes to soft security issues. Looking at economic security, for example, dealing with hybrid warfare. The global cooperation and training framework is a very useful platform for Taiwan in this regard, because it has allowed Taiwan to engage on security also with those countries that are otherwise very reluctant to engage. So even countries like Greece, for example, have engaged with Taiwan on security under the GCTF platform. Economic relations, EU is Taiwan's largest investor over the years, bigger than US. So that's very good news for us in Europe, that we are very much linked to Taiwan economically. A lot of that is driven by the semiconductor sector and adjacent sectors, but there are opportunities elsewhere as well. Nowadays, there's a lot of discussion, for example, with regards to security adjacent economic fields. So, for example, drone production cooperation, drone exports from Taiwan to Europe. Just last week, Economist ran a story about the fact that Czech Republic and Poland are now the global largest buyers of Taiwanese drones for their militaries, largely then providing them to Ukraine for its own defense efforts. Subnational and grassroots ties also an important dimensions. I already touched up on university and think tank organized conferences as an important platform for semi-official engagements. But there are some aspects that are missing, and there's also one bullet point missing in my slide on city-to-city cooperation, which is also increasingly active. Right now, we have 27 cities and self-governing regions in Europe that have partnerships with Taiwanese counterparts, which is quite good as a conduit for relations. But if we contextualize it, for example, by comparing to US or to Japan, it is still very low. Japan itself has over 30 such partnerships and US over 100. Of course, there is one important link missing for establishing these types of partnerships, and that is that both in Japan and in the US, they are largely driven by local Taiwanese diasporas, which tend to be much smaller in Europe. But nevertheless, they offer a platform for future engagement. What is missing still is direct political party dialogues as a conduit for relations, for example, so that the real political ties don't have to develop only on the level of elected officials, but that the practical policy dialogue can happen with party staffers, for example, which would be a less sensitive way how to engage politically active Taiwanese citizens on matters where we can share learning experiences. So with this in mind, we should think about how to make sure that the relationship, which has had a very rapid start, is future-proofed and remains sustainable. We propose 4 pillars along which the relations should be developing down the line. First one being economic resilience. One reason why European countries started to engage with Taiwan was a growing China fatigue and being tired of unfulfilled economic promises by China. And Taiwan needs to be wary of not going down the similar path. A lot of economic promises have been made in terms of investment into the semiconductor supply chains, for example, and those need to be delivered on now so that the similar Taiwan fatigue when it comes to economic relations doesn't set in. This requires very stringent identification of overlapping economic interests, so that the relationship is based on a very practical reading of what each side has to offer to each other, which also means that we need to continue to remove some of the remaining market access barriers that can make it difficult to engage economically. Having this in mind, political signaling should still be an important aspect of the relationship. Symbolic diplomacy helps to keep Taiwan in the discourse, and that is very important for asserting Taiwan's sovereignty, Taiwan's presence in our international imagination, so that China's propaganda doesn't prevail over Taiwan's identity. This also requires trust building, so doing more 1.5 track dialogues and other forms of semi-official engagements where new ideas for cooperation can be brainstormed, when dirty laundry can be aired out behind closed doors so that we can focus on the positives of the relationship. And public diplomacy, of course. In most of Europe, we see public opinion about Taiwan improving. Parallel to this study, we ran a public opinion survey in 4 countries of Central Europe, in Slovakia, Czechia, Poland, and Hungary. And in each 4 of those, we've seen a very positive development compared to the survey we've done 5 years before. In case of Slovakia, for example, it was a increase in net favorability of Taiwan by 18 percentage points, for example. Quite a big change in favorability in a period of 5 years. What this favorability has not turned into yet would be support of local populations into support in case of Taiwan's trade contingency, in case of China's invasion of Taiwan. And this is the big homework for Taiwan down the line, working on transforming favorability into support. And I'm gonna stop here because I think that a lot of this can be painted with specific country case examples. So thank you for now, and happy to discuss any of this during Q&A.
Good. Oh, okay. So let me continue now with a very short rundown how this can work in different countries. We've prepared 3 cases for you. One is the Slovak case that Matej has mentioned. Then we will have a non-EU country. And then last but not least, we will talk about the country where we are now. So as Maciej has mentioned, Slovakia is a very interesting case because between the years 2020 and 2023, we would have categorized this country differently. So let's, right now it's a pragmatist, but let's look into it more deeply. So just a very quick historic rundown. Slovakia became independent in 1993 and the mutual offices were opened in 2003. And also a few years later, the Slovak parliament established this unofficial Slovak-Taiwanese parliamentary friendship group that is still active from then until now. And the relationship evolved from very little engagement in the 90s to one of the most active countries in the early 2020s, just then to again stagnate after the year 2023, but we will get to that. So in the early 2020s, the relationship has strengthened, and what that meant, that we saw a lot of high-level political exchanges, we saw supportive resolutions in the Slovak parliament, we saw new economic activities, and also various other smaller things such as sister city agreements, academic exchanges, and so on. As was mentioned by my colleague Maciej, this was driven firstly by the disillusionment with Chinese promises, and then secondly, with domestic political changes. So the approach of the government that came to power in 2020 was to develop a closer relationship with Taiwan, but this was done on a basis of pragmatism. So pursuing a positive agenda with Taiwan while avoiding direct and public confrontation with China. Here we can actually differentiate on the European level among those countries that we have categorized as the most friendly towards Taiwan. We can divide these into 2 groups, where one model would be this very high visibility symbolic model that would apply to Czechia and Lithuania, and then the practicality-based approach for Poland and Slovakia until 2023. So of course, both have upsides and downsides, but this is just to show you that these differences exist. In the early 2020s, there were new agreements. On this slide, you can see that even before the relationship strengthened, there were certain mutual agreements, such as the driver's licenses and so on. But it became much more substantial after 2020 with judicial cooperation that is quite unique, and this is also here to stay. So even if a new government comes, as happened, these arrangements will stay in place, and they also include agreement on extradition. In this case, Slovakia is only the 2nd EU country to have such an extradition agreement with Taiwan. Then I mentioned there were these supportive resolutions. Mostly it was supporting Taiwan to participate in various international organizations. Then mutual visits. I will not go through all of that. I just want to highlight that there were big delegations going from Slovakia to Taiwan, also the other way around. Let me maybe highlight the one from 2021, where a delegation traveled to Taiwan on an official government airplane. So this is the first thing that stands out. It was a lot of business people, and during this meeting also the Taiwanese-Slovak Commission on Economic Cooperation has been established. Now, since the new government in 2023 took office, we don't see these high-level visits anymore. So this happened after 2023 in the elections when Robert Fico took the government, and he decided to foster relationships, foster a closer relationship with China. This is based on the all-azimuth foreign policy, but this also means engaging with autocratic country, which culminated with the conclusion of the China-Slovakia strategic partnership in 2024, which also means limiting relations with Taiwan. On the economic front, the mentioned Taiwanese-Slovak Commission on Economic Cooperation, established in 2021 in this golden era. This commission meets annually, met 3 times, and with the onset of the new government, they have not met, although the commission has not been cancelled. So should there be a new government, this format can be revived. Here we can also see on this slide that after COVID, bilateral trade was booming. Now it's again going down a little bit. And also we could see that investment went up, especially there's the Taiwania capital that invested in 2 companies in Slovakia. There's, of course, also subnational interaction. So 2 cities have sister agreements. There's also a sister railway agreement. I think that's quite unique. And then, of course, academic think tank exchanges, and even books are being translated. When speaking about the Indo-Pacific strategy, a lot of European countries have an Indo-Pacific strategy. The European Union has one. So here Slovakia is a latecomer. There has been a strategy for 3 months now. And what is interesting that this document does not list Taiwan among its strategic or important partners, but this is not so uncommon. I think Lithuania and the Czech Republic mention it, but other countries actually don't. But what is interesting that Taiwan is still mentioned as an economic partner, having made a substantial investment in Slovakia. And I think I will stop here and pass on the word to Julia, who will talk about Norway.
So yes, just to give you, I would like to give you a little bit of a context here why I worked on Norway. I'm not Norwegian. I'm actually Austrian with an Italian name. But I did my postdoc in Norway, and I worked at the Chinese language department. And the opportunity that Matthew and Christina and Alfred gave me was to actually dive deeper into experiences that I've made at the institutional level. I would like to start out with there was a formatting mistake, but that's not a problem. With the statement, it's an official statement, like it's from a government document, and it says, the Norwegian government reiterates its commitment to the One China policy, fully respects China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, attaches high importance to China's core interests and major concerns, will not support actions that undermine them, and will do its best to avoid any future damage to the bilateral relations. This is a statement that was signed by both governments after diplomatic relations were resumed after a 6 years so-called diplomatic freeze between Norway and China. And I would like to ask you, what does this tell you about Taiwan and Norway relations? Any guess? Okay, yeah. Yes. Yes, they're not strong at all. And when CEIAS came to me with the request writing about Norway-Taiwan relations. I was thrilled. Oh my God, finally I can do this. But then I got nervous starting the research because I found more on China and Norway-China relations than on Taiwan. And I thought, oh my God, how can I accomplish this this task? But I actually found something, and it obviously departs, like in every country, from the one China policy and the country's relationship with China and the importance of China for the specific country. China-Norway relation. China is a priority country for Norway. In many respects, there are agreements. There is a strategic document, especially for internationalization and education. It's a strategic partner. It's the biggest trading partner in Asia. And this is it. And there is nothing on Taiwan. There are no agreements. There is no representation. The Norwegians even categorize Taiwanese citizens coming into the country as Chinese citizens, which makes it very difficult to actually estimate the number of Taiwanese living in Norway. There were representatives' offices. In the 1980s, the Taiwanese government opened a representative office in Oslo, but it closed down in 2017, mostly because there are very few relationships, like trade relations, exchange relations, that would have justified putting further resources, more resources into the representative office. The Norwegians set up a trade office in the late 1990s. In the 1990s, together with Denmark, but closed it down in the early 2000s, also for lacking relations, exchange, and so on. So until now, the government, the relationships, or everything that comes from Taiwan to Norway is administered by the Taipei Representative Office in Sweden. Like, for example, the Taipei representative in Austria covers also Slovenia and Croatia. So this is not uncommon, but it hinders actually building relationships, especially in Scandinavia, which is a huge, like Norway is a huge country. Sweden is a huge country, and you need a lot of travel budget in order to cover everything in a lot of time. So it does not help building relationships from the Taiwanese side. We have 3 high-level bilateral visits that happened in the last years, and it very much concurs with findings of other studies. And the high-level visit was conducted by the leader of a small party, the Liberal Party, and she went to Taiwan for the first time in 15 years. President Lai Ching-te then gave an online address at the party congress. So that's it in bilateral visits. We have though Taiwanese associations over there, like we have the Chamber of Commerce, how they call themselves, so the Association of Taiwanese Entrepreneurs, Taishuanghui. Then we have the Student Association, and we have a general association that was born in like having like Chinese migrants, Taiwanese migrants, but then they shifted more to the Taiwanese side. So this is what's there in terms of what's in Norway. But still, Norway is very interesting because of this. Because it doesn't want to have Taiwan is not the priority, and the reason is we don't know. We really don't know what the reason is, but there is also one aspect that makes that makes very much the case also for other countries. There is a bipartisan consensus that that relationships with China take precedence. And it's both big parties, both the Labour Party and the Conservative parties. Over very long, they changed governments, but they over a very long time, over 2 decades, they agreed on China taking precedence. And all of them say Taiwan is not a priority for us. You can have at the subnational level, like institutions can have their bilateral relations, companies can have their bilateral relations, but we will not have government-to-government relations. And they do it, but, and here's the but, because observers say that the 2016 and the incidents with Liu Xiaobo was how to say, formative. It was formative, but the process towards a very, very narrowly defined one China policy that in rhetoric and practice is basically the one China principle started way before. It started in the early 2000s when Taiwan started consistently, when Norway like referred to its relations to China as we do recognize only the People's Republic of China, and therefore we cannot have any other relationships and government-to-government relationships whatsoever with Taiwan. So that's basically that's what's to say about Norway. But still, Taiwan can do something because there is this small party, the Liberal Party, that pushes for relationships for agreements also with Taiwan, and it very much feeds on public opinion. And public opinion against on China is not favorable, which has also led to a window of opportunity of those people wanting the government or wanting Norway to be to engage more with Norway. So what they do, what Taiwan can actually do is really invest more and more into strategically and also resource-wise into the subnational diplomacy, support the parliamentary friendship groups, build government-to-party relationships, offer more scholarships like project funding schemes in order to entice to build relations. Not at the official level, but at the low level. And my last sentence, and then I finish. And maybe, because remember at the beginning that I said that the relationships, like the representative office in Sweden now caters to the also takes care of relationships with Norway, and it is difficult because of a lack of resources. So if Taiwan invests in a one-man office with enough travel budget, this would already make a difference, because a person could work better than the current office in Sweden with the limited resources that they have. Thank you. So yes, just to give you, I would like to give you a little bit of a context here why I worked on Norway. I'm not Norwegian. I'm actually Austrian with an Italian name. But I did my postdoc in Norway, and I worked at the Chinese language department. And the opportunity that Matthew and Christina and Alfred gave me was to actually dive deeper into experiences that I've made at the institutional level. I would like to start out with there was a formatting mistake, but that's not a problem. With the statement, it's an official statement, like it's from a government document, and it says, the Norwegian government reiterates its commitment to the One China policy, fully respects China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, attaches high importance to China's core interests and major concerns, will not support actions that undermine them, and will do its best to avoid any future damage to the bilateral relations. This is a statement that was signed by both governments after diplomatic relations were resumed after a 6 years so-called diplomatic freeze between Norway and China. And I would like to ask you, what does this tell you about Taiwan and Norway relations? Any guess? Okay, yeah. Yes. Yes, they're not strong at all. And when CEIAS came to me with the request writing about Norway-Taiwan relations, I was thrilled. Oh my God, finally I can do this. But then I got nervous starting the research because I found more on China and Norway-China relations than on Taiwan. And I thought, oh my God, how can I accomplish this task? But I actually found something, and it obviously departs, like in every country, from the one China policy and the country's relationship with China and the importance of China for the specific country. China-Norway relation. China is a priority country for Norway. In many respects, there are agreements. There is a strategic document, especially for internationalization and education. It's a strategic partner. It's the biggest trading partner in Asia. And this is it. And there is nothing on Taiwan. There are no agreements. There is no representation. The Norwegians even categorize Taiwanese citizens coming into the country as Chinese citizens, which makes it very difficult to actually estimate the number of Taiwanese living in Norway. There were representatives' offices. In the 1980s, the Taiwanese government opened a representative office in Oslo, but it closed down in 2017, mostly because there are very few relationships, like trade relations, exchange relations, that would have justified putting further resources, more resources into the representative office. The Norwegians set up a trade office in the late 1990s. In the 1990s, together with Denmark. But closed it down in the early 2000s, also for lacking relations, exchange, and so on. So until now, the government, the relationships, or everything that comes from Taiwan to Norway, is administered by the Taipei Representative Office in Sweden. Like, for example, the Taipei representative in Austria covers also Slovenia and Croatia. So this is not uncommon, but it hinders actually building relationships, especially in Scandinavia, which is a huge, like Norway is a huge country. Sweden is a huge country, and you need a lot of travel budget in order to cover everything in a lot of time. So it does not help building relationships from the Taiwanese side. We have 3 high-level bilateral visits that happened in the last years, and it very much concurs with findings of other studies. And the high-level visit was conducted by the leader of a small party, the Liberal Party, and she went to Taiwan for the first time in 15 years. President Lai Ching-te then gave an online address at the party congress. So that's it in bilateral visits. We have, though, Taiwanese associations over there, like we have the Chamber of Commerce, how they call themselves, so the Association of Taiwanese Entrepreneurs, Taishanhui. Then we have the Student Association, and we have a general association that was born in like having like Chinese migrants, Taiwanese migrants, but then they shifted more to the Taiwanese side. So this is what's there in terms of what's in Norway. But still, Norway is very interesting because of this. Because it doesn't want to have Taiwan is not the priority, and the reason is we don't know. We really don't know what the reason is, but there is also one aspect that makes that makes very much the case also for other countries. There is a bipartisan consensus that that relationships with China take precedence, and it's both big parties, both the Labour Party and the Conservative parties. Over very long, they changed governments, but they over a very long time, over 2 decades, they agreed on China taking precedence. And all of them say Taiwan is not the priority for us. You can have at the subnational level, like institutions can have their bilateral relations, companies can have their bilateral relations, but we will not have government to government relations. And they do it, but, and here's the but, because observers say that the 2016 and the incidents with Liu Xiaobo was how to say, formative. It was formative, but the process towards a very, very narrowly defined one China policy that in rhetoric and practice is basically the one China principle started way before. It started in the early 2000s when Taiwan started consistently, when Norway like referred to its relations to China as we do recognize only the People's Republic of China, and therefore we cannot have any other relationships and government to government relationships whatsoever with Taiwan. So that's basically that's what's to say about Norway. But still, Taiwan can do something because there is this small party, the Liberal Party, that pushes for relationships with for agreements also with Taiwan, and it very much feeds on public opinion. And public opinion against on China is not favorable, which has also led to a window of opportunity of those people wanting the government or wanting Norway to be to engage more with Norway. So what they do, what Taiwan can actually do is really invest more and more into strategically and also resource-wise into the subnational diplomacy, support national the parliamentary friendship groups, build government-to-party relationships, offer more scholarships like project funding schemes in order to entice to build relations. Not at the official level, but at the low level. And my last sentence, and then I finish. And maybe, because remember at the beginning that I said that the relationships, like the representative office in Sweden now caters to the also takes care of relationships with Norway, and it is difficult because of a lack of resources. So if Taiwan invests in a one-man office with enough travel budget, this would already make a difference, because a person could work better than the current office in Sweden with the limited resources that they have. Thank you.
And last but not least, I'm happy to present on Austria together with my colleague Freda Fiala. And Austria is a pragmatist. There we go. Yep. Let us start with the limitations for closer relations between Austria and Taiwan. And well, you see the panda, of course, the symbol for China. We had a big political and economic delegation traveling to China in 2018. That was also when Vienna and Beijing signed the so-called friendly strategic partnership. Since then, the relations between Austria and the People's Republic have become even more closely. And this is, of course, the framework in which we have to also understand the relations with Taiwan. China is Austria's second largest import partner. Also, the Austrian exports to China are increasing. So China is among, right now, I think it's the fourth largest economic partner of Austria. So, of course, economically much more important than small Taiwan. Also, a limitation is that in Austria, well, we are here at the Department of East Asian Studies, so we have an interest in East Asia. However, if you look at the broad public, but actually also the media coverage, if there is something about Asia, it's usually Northeast Asia, strong focus on China, Japan, maybe South Korea, gradually India, but even Southeast Asia is usually not addressed in much depth or compared to other countries. Also in the last 2 years, that was Freda's and my focus, there were domestic limitations because we had an election year. Then, as you are aware, it took quite a while until we had a new coalition government, and it also took a few months for the coalition government to start. Therefore, also there were not many foreign policy initiatives. Austria has an office, a so-called Austrian office in Taipei. Conversely, there is a Taiwan Economic and Cultural Office, TECOR, which not only represents Taiwan in Austria, but also to the international organizations in the United Nations, and is also responsible for the relations with Croatia and Slovenia. In the last year, there is a clear pattern. So there were a couple of meetings, regular meetings between senior Austrian officials, either with their counterparts in Taiwan or up to the level of deputy ministers in Taiwan. There are also frequent visits of Austrian members of parliament, also of regional parliaments to Taiwan, led by the Austrian Taiwan Friendship Group. Important is that's not a parliamentary institution. That's basically a group formed by Austrian members of parliament with an interest in Taiwan. All parties are represented in this friendship group except one, the Freedom Party. So therefore, also thinking, because Christina mentioned change of governments in Slovakia, if there's a change in government, a Freedom Party-led coalition, it's very likely that the relations with Taiwan will be cut down and relations with China, Russia will be deepened. One visit, however, stands out, happened at the end of 2015, the visit of the Taiwanese foreign minister to Austria. However, and this is a big however, he visited Austria in a private mission. He attended a concert in Vienna. So it was not an official visit. So Austria, the trade, it is improving, but it's also going back and forth. And it's actually difficult to say what the reasons are. According to the Austrian Chamber of Commerce, it's the economic situation in Taiwan. So for Austrian companies, it was less attractive to invest or conduct trade, but this is really something that could change quite quickly. Investments of both countries, comparatively low, we have to say, compared to other countries. Austria does have a trade office, and I said economic relations, yes, stable, back and forth, but we identified one potential driving force, not only for closer economic relations, but also civil society relations, at least a factor to improve the mutual awareness between Taiwan and Austria. And this is a quite high number of tourists from Taiwan coming to Austria. So to put it in proportion, we had in 24 150 tourists from Taiwan compared to 500,000 from Big China. So this is quite a significant number. Downside is they usually stay only a couple of days. So Tourism Austria is interested in extending the stay of Taiwanese tourists in Austria. The other way around, there are many direct flights actually between Vienna and Taipei. However, for Austrian tourists, Taipei is really only a stopover, maybe for 1 day or not even for 1 day, because they just want to fly to other East Asian or Southeast Asian countries. So there's also potential to actually, for Taiwan, to attract more Austrian tourists. I'm now happy to give the word to my colleague Freda, and you will talk more about the civil society relations.
Well, thank you so much for organizing this. I would like to just briefly acknowledge the wonderful effort that my colleagues have done here with this reader. And my part is going to focus on a rather sort of specific form of exchanges, which are the so-called cultural exchanges. I would like to start, though, by briefly mentioning civil society relations between Taiwan and Austria, as a lot of the so-called cultural exchanges do come from individuals' efforts to establish them. So I would categorize these relations as asymmetric and limited, but stable. A few thousand Taiwanese live in Austria. You see where the asymmetry comes from. Only a few hundred Austrians live in Taiwan. There are two volunteer associations that greatly benefit these communities. One is the Taiwanese Association in Austria that exists since 1970, whereas the Austrian Taipei Society exists since 2008. So again, you see sort of the formalization of these two associations taking place at a different time. Under former representative to Taiwan, Roland Rudolpher, in 2022, there was a cooperation set up that now enables quite a, I would say, relevant exchange on the civil society level, which concerns those who are doing Zivildienst, civil service. And since 2022, it's possible to do civil service as an Austrian in Taiwan in cooperation with either the Jeffrey Schwartz Jewish Community Center, the Shungye Museum of Formosan Aborigines, and the Taipei Women's Rescue Foundation. I will not go into academic relations here in detail, but I think from what we see is that they are also strong, including University of Vienna's relationship with several Taiwanese universities, who I still thank very much for giving me the chance to go to Taiwan for the first time. On cultural exchanges, what can be said is that they are largely informal, so there's no bilateral agreement that would sort of give us a programmatic framework on how cultural exchanges should be done, which results in a largely layered ecosystem of institutions, diaspora initiatives, and also independent projects. What is very clearly recognizable, sort of if we look to data, we see that Taiwan strongly supports outgoing mobility in a very systematic way through culture, especially through the Ministry of Culture, whereas Austria, when non-European sort of cultural diplomacy in the broader sense is concerned, I would say rather belongs to those category of laggards and is really more active only on the level of project-based funding. I was wondering how many of you, and I know some of you are certainly sort of experts or avid observers of relationships with Taiwan. I was wondering how many of you know that right now in Taipei, the National Museum of History hosts an exhibition by the Belvedere. This is the largest exhibition, the Belvedere, has loaned to another museum in, I would say, probably at least over a decade. And it is the largest exhibition by far that has traveled outside of Europe, outside the EU, since over 3 decades. So within the Austrian media, we had one single article reporting on this exhibition that even includes the Klimt and the Waldmüller drawings. And arguably, this instance could be taken, while of course, you know, the theme, I mean, flowers, sort of suggesting a very unpolitical, feminized space. Still, this very exhibition, I guess, could be taken as an example that that there is a certain imbalance at work when it comes to who wants to engage whom. A few examples of projects or exchanges that actually happened. There was an exhibition by Huang Po-chi, who is currently director of Taipei Digital Arts Center, called Blue Elephant in Vienna at the MUMOC in 2021. Well, here, I guess we can forgive all of us who didn't really notice this exhibition, as it fell the timing fell together with one of the lockdowns we had in the COVID pandemic. So this was, however, neither the artists nor the museum's fault. So on the other hand, I would also here like to draw your attention to the sort of topical framing of this exchange, because the story that we're witnessing is a very personal one. Huang Po-chi is speaking about the relationship to his mother, who you also see pictured in the exhibition, and her case is referenced as as an individual who was working very hard to support Taiwan's economic miracle in the 70s through the garment industry. So also, I would say this exhibition is sort of fairly safe in terms of its articulations on the political level. There's one fairly consistent exchange that takes place since 3 years now, which I happened to be able to set up during one of my longer stays for my PhD research in Taiwan, which is a residency between the Gmundner ceramic manufacturer, one of the oldest and largest ceramic manufacturers in Central Europe, and the New Taipei City Inge Ceramics Museum. Pictured on the image here are Chang Chi-wen, the director of the museum in Taiwan, and Alfred Weidinger from Upper Austria. And interestingly, it was only a few months after this residency had started that the museum in Upper Austria suddenly received another inquiry from Taipei Tech University, who are working with ceramics in semiconductors. So they contacted Upper Austria with the request that they were planning an exhibition to travel to Europe, and whether this exhibition could also be hosted in Austria, given the friendly preconditions that they suggested. However, as you see, sort of every potential for diplomatic initiative is used. However, this in the end did not develop further, as they decided that the exhibition that was supposed to travel to Poland first finally did not come into shape. I'm going to jump over here just to give you an impression of what happened actually last year when emerging artist Cao Chen-xiang was hosted in Gmunden. And I would like to finally also highlight, of course, that beyond the more experimental artistic exchanges, classical music, obviously, Western classical music, European classical music, Austrian classical music plays a huge role in how Austria, as a post-World War II self-branded so-called cultural nation or Kulturnation, is being perceived not only in Taiwan, in the broader Asia Pacific. And the appointment of Representative Liu San-Jung to Vienna in 2024 could be seen in a relation to sort of benefiting from Austria's self-branded cultural nation image, as Representative Liu is a trained musician and has studied before in Vienna at the University for Music and Performing Arts before actually now returning as the official Taiwanese representative. 2025 has also seen a massive project that Taiwan pursued, targeting over 20 countries in Europe with over 70 large-scale orchestra and theater performances called the Taiwan Culture Year in Europe, the Year of Taiwan Culture. To conclude, I believe this also sort of leads into the discussion in a way, but I believe the work on the reader showed me a very delicate aspect also of engaging with cultural diplomacy as a research topic. As it is, as you may have sort of heard, if you compare sort of the framing of our presentations, how many names, for example, I've just given you, yes? This points inevitably to the fact that this working on cultural exchange means doing case-based studies rather than doing structural analysis. This is widely acknowledged also by Taiwanese colleagues who have written on the question of the dependency also of researchers who want to engage with cultural institutions, stating that unless you're in a way part of an institution, you're never able to get the data. And this is a really big difference when it comes to, for example, the trade offices publishing their data versus cultural institutions publishing data. For sure, in the Austrian context, Taiwan is a bit more open when it comes to publishing data in their cultural institutions as part of its democratization process, I would say. But in Austria, this is certainly, at least from my experience, a relevant issue. With this, I would like to give back to Alfred for summing up the key takeaways of our part of the study between Taiwan and Austria.
I'm very glad that Freda highlighted the cultural relations between Austria and Taiwan, because in our study, basically, there's only one other country with which Taiwan has strong relations, in which the cultural dimension plays a strong role. And it's Finland, where the representative is the famous Freddie Lim, politician, heavy metal musician. So here, and in Finland, heavy metal is big. And therefore, it's really playing to the strengths or interests of these countries. So Freda and I, in regard to Austria, we identified culture as one potential driving force for closer relations. The second one being tourism as an intriguing one. Otherwise, I think the last years, it was the same as the years before. There were no major ups or downs in regard to the political relations, also economically as outlined. It's a gradual development. In 1 year, import-exports are higher, others lower, but there is no clear trend. So also in regard to the next 5 years, to provide an outlook, I believe Austria will remain a pragmatist, and this will remain the case as long as the current government will stay in power. Having said this, we will now open the floor to you. Very much interested in your question, feedback, criticism, and Agnes, may I ask you to moderate the discussion?